So in the airline sector after 9/11, I was struck by the appearance of all kinds of vendors of technology which I had no idea existed. And, you know, of course, those people made a nuisance of themselves after a time. But I tend to think technology is the answer. The trains, as Karen was saying, they slow down to 4 miles an hour and they edge across the border and they don't even stop as long as they're keeping to their commitment and the manifest matches what's showing up on the radar, X-ray, then they're fine to go. Truckers and individuals don't have those kinds of privileges as yet. And it seems to me that, you know, it's perfectly possible to take a container truck from Vaughan, for example, which is a container port north of Toronto, lock that container. You can be certain that the container was not open. There's lots of ways to do that. You can track the vehicle with transponder or some sort of barcode system, and you could know by the time it arrived at the border and the U.S. officer actually sees it, that person can know that the vehicle has not been opened and it hasn't stopped. They already know who the driver is. All that can be done miles away from the border, and it can be done a long time before the trip. So just one example of something that could perhaps be developed. Technology is going to be the solution to these problems. And there's no question we need an extremely high level of security, and it only takes one breakdown in that security to ruin the entire system. But I think we're highly motivated to find those solutions. So I tend to be thinking, I've been urging the Canadians to talk to the vendor community to see what technologies will allow.
Two things. One, there is a tremendous amount of misinformation and or lack of information among policymakers, both in and out of Congress, and I'm sure without knowing precisely in the various state legislatures as well. For example, the common myth that was repeated over and over again by people in both parties that the 9/11 terrorists came into the U.S. from Canada is absolutely false. They took pilot training in Florida. They got in, however they got in, through the systems that we had in place in the United States. They didn't come from Canada. That isn't not to say that Canada doesn't worry about these issues. They do. But they were wrongfully blamed. There are members of Congress of both parties who this very day view the northern border as a great threat. There are people making policies in the Southwest who think that we need guard dogs and tunnels and machine guns and towers because they're used to dealing with hundreds and thousands of people trying to run across the border to get jobs. Oftentimes, the policies designed to deal with immigration are directed, you know, at drug smugglers from Mexico, but they spill over on Canada. This education problem is huge. And then you can understand this. Most of you are fairly knowledgeable about government. They created the Department of Homeland Security. They put together, this is unbelievable, they put together bits and pieces of 27 U.S. departments and agencies consisting of 170,000 people into a new department. That would make the most ardent 1950s Chinese communist blush. It will be years before this department really is synchronized and organized. That's why they had all the problems with FEMA during Hurricane Katrina. Part of it was just the FEMA basically lost its freedom, its flexibility, its independence, regardless of who was leading it. So this is a huge issue. Which is why the people who live along these borders, whether they are in upstate New York or Michigan or Minnesota or Washington State, probably have more knowledge about how to do things, which is why we are happy that you're here, Warren, and that Karen Beatty, your president, was here. Why we're happy that Governor Snyder has put a lot of time and attention on it, and why Karen has talked about the fact that at least with rails, we have a very good security system. We have a long way to go, and getting information out about the realities of life is really the key. And that's why our Center for Canadian Studies is important here at MSU. So much for my lecturing, but I wanted to say that. Because I deal with these all the time, and I'm just amazed at the kind of questions that are asked and the lack of information.
I would just totally echo what my two predecessors have said. I totally agree with their points. The other concept I would add to it, in addition to technology and education and everything else, is we've got to get to a point where our governments embrace a risk management approach to a greater degree. When you have trusted travelers, when you have trusted commerce, you need to make sure that that is more the fundamental where you're focusing, so that government efforts can be focused on the real terrorist threats instead of on commerce or on people where there isn't as great a threat. The Canadian government has done a really good job on this. The U.S. government has done a good job, but they have a ways to go. I think partly, as Warren was talking about, that there's a sense in the U.S. that we're the target more, and so I think there's a sense that we need to do more on security than on the risk management side. But we really need to get at that, and I'm hopeful that the Harper-Obama initiative is going to be one way to really get at a true risk management, risk-based approach, because I think that will make a tremendous difference in moving things in the right direction.